Well, good evening and welcome to tonight's Money Matters workshop on scams coming to you. My name is Kimberly Prime, Director of Constituent Services and Community Partnerships for Howard County Executive Calvin Ball. Before we get to our speaker, just a few housekeeping items. Tonight's meeting is being recorded and will be uploaded to our Money Matters website for those unable to join us, or if you'd like to watch at a later time. You can find this video along with our other Money Matters workshops we're hosting throughout the month of April at www.howardcountymd.gov/money-matters. During the presentation, if you have any questions, we kindly ask that you place them in the chat box located in the lower right corner of your screen. Following the presentation, our speaker will have the opportunity to answer them. We've also provided a sign language interpreter, which you should see at the top of your screen. Now I'll turn things over to tonight's speaker, Tracy Rosmani, Administrator of Howard County's Office of Consumer Protection. Hi, Tracy.
Hi, how are you? And good evening, and thank you for joining us tonight. We'll be talking about scams that we might see in the area and different kinds of schemes that you can help us warn your friends and family about. Our phone number and email address is on the first slide. Feel free to reach out to us at any time should you have any consumer questions. So very briefly, what do we do? For those who've never used our agency, we handle disputes between a merchant and a consumer, or between a landlord and a tenant. I always say that if money is involved and you're not happy with how things turned out, with some limitations, you can bring your complaint to our office, and we have investigators who can be assigned to review the facts and the law for you. We have consumer specialists who are available by phone or email or even in person. If you've got records that you need us to go through, feel free to pop on by. And if in the course of our investigation we see that the law was violated, we're also able to enforce the county's consumer protection law. We do a lot of outreach programming like what you see here today. So if you belong to a civic group, a business group, or a community group of any kind, and you think there might be a consumer topic you'd like us to come and provide, feel free to reach out to us. Lastly, we also do license and regulate a couple industries in the county. One is trespass towers. So if you've had the unfortunate luck of being towed out of a private parking lot, hopefully that tow company has our license. Also peddlers and solicitors, which now that we're coming into spring, you're going to get a lot of folks coming door to door and some food trucks. Those entities need to be licensed by us as well. So what are some basic statistics that we need to be aware of about what the scam landscape looks like? So I've got some statistics over the last few years to see exactly what we're talking about. In 2019, the World Economic Forum report gave a really startling statistic, which is less than 0.5% of cyber crimes internationally are caught. And this is going to be a common refrain, and that is because fraud is underreported, and there seems to be a cross-jurisdictional sharing issue as well. Also in 19, about half of the phone calls to your cell phone came from robo-dialers. So when you think about half of those calls being robo-dialers, most of them are going to be international based. Less than 0.5% are getting caught because of underreporting. How bad is it? Well, according to econsumer.gov, there was only 60,000 reports of international scams in 2020. And yet that still reported $211 million in losses. So it's not a lot of numbers, but it's a lot in the way of dollars, but that is still a tip of the iceberg. In 21, the FTC reported 2.8 million fraud reports with 2.3 billion in losses. And, in 2020 and with the exception of the early pandemic, Americans were fielding about 5 billion spam calls per month. And the only drop was for those first 2 months of the pandemic because all the call centers got emptied out. And the latest stat that I have is that about 25% of all reported losses starts on social media. So we have to be very, very vigilant as to what it is we're seeing and interacting when we're dealing with those kinds of platforms. So who's typically targeted? I think there was a perception that seniors were the main target, and that absolutely was the case. And there's a lot of reasons for that. But what's being shown lately is that it's really the millennials that are rapidly becoming the fraud targets. And that's because they're too comfortable online, they tend to trust websites a little too easily, and there is this lack of financial literacy. I think that with seniors, we've done so much education in that area that I think the senior and the older American population has gotten better about spotting scams. But who is really targeted today? Well, the scamdemic, the pandemic, targeted everybody equally, which is where this phrase scamdemic comes from. You were young, you were old, you were employed, you were unemployed. It didn't matter. They came for you during the pandemic. And so it was the great equalizer over the last couple of years. What are some scams that we're seeing a lot of? Any kind of Medicare or insurance benefit ID theft. We're seeing that. A lot of bogus investments in cures, especially dealing with COVID preventatives and cures. The FTC has been run ragged with cease and desist orders over the last couple of years. Imposter scams. Amazon is the #1 entity out there that is being spoofed or cloned with fake text messages and emails. #1 for imposter scams. We're coming on tax season, so you better believe that in May, you're going to start getting fake IRS phone calls. Work from home scams. We were all working from home, so there was a lot of scams. We'll talk about what kinds of criminal activity folks got accidentally looped into thinking they were getting a legitimate job at home. And grandparent scams, well, those that they just basically added a COVID flavor, if you will, to the storyline that was being pitched. Financial exploitation, especially of seniors, is a perennial. And coming into home improvement season, the woodchucks or the home improvement scams, we'll talk about that some more. Everyone's probably gotten at least one phone call that their social security number has been inactivated or there's some sort of social security fraud. That's going to keep coming. Then, with everyone having some financial difficulties during the pandemic, mortgage assistance fraud was on the rise. Whenever it gets hot or cold, you're going to get utility cutoff notices where someone tells you you have to pay in gift cards, or you have to wire money or pay by payment app. So be wary of cutoff notice phone calls where they claim that you haven't paid your bill in months and you have. And some of these we'll talk about in more detail. The biggest issue where it comes to scams is demonstrated by these two side-by-side statistics. So Scam Advisor, which is a great website. If you're shopping online and you don't know if this particular website is trustworthy, you go to Scam Advisor. It'll tell you if this website has been in business for 5 days or 5 years. It'll tell you whether there's any kind of bad reviews, any red flags, etc. They did a survey and they asked folks, how comfortable are you in spotting a scam? And 71% said they're fairly confident that they can spot a scam. So then Scam Advisors threw out a bunch of questions and said, okay, here are some possible examples of scams. Identify which ones are the scams. Well, just about the same number could not spot the scam. So this shows that consumers have this overconfidence bias and that they believe they know a scam, that they'll be able to spot one, but when the time came, they were not able to. So this is not unusual. So the first chapter today, we'll talk about phone scams, which I think we all are privy to. Um, so how much are we talking about that is lost? And if you look in 2021, the amount that was lost was $502 million, according to Truecaller. So Truecaller is like No More Robo. It's one of those call blocking technology products on the market. So according to their statistics, about $502 million was lost to phone scams. As you can see, that is higher than any year that they had on record. And then, so who is at risk? And remember, I said millennials and the younger generation seem to be the new targets. Well, this bears it out because it looks like 18 to 44 and male tends to be the scam victims that are most at risk according to the Truecaller statistic. So how do phone scams work? Well, there's this concept of the lizard brain where it's trying to trigger an emotional, instinctive response rather than a thinking response to some kind of a stimulus, right? So the first thing that happens is they spoof the phone number. So your caller ID will lie to you. And I always tell the story about being home alone and having my cell phone ring and my home phone being on the caller ID. So with voice over IP, it doesn't matter where you are in the world, you can make it seem as if you're getting a call from next door. And so that's how the spoofing or the cloning works. That's how they trick people into thinking they really are getting a call from the IRS. They are getting a call from their bank or someone down the street. So usually they're trying to trigger this emotional response. Fear tends to be the biggest one that is triggered. But, you know, they can say you've won a sweepstakes, or, hey, you know, we've got your neighbors recommended us to come in and do some, you know, in-home assessments of something or other. So they can come up with all kinds of ways of tricking you. But the first is to make your caller ID lie to you. So you should definitely avoid your avoid the calls if you can, and trust your instincts, right? So screen the calls. If you don't recognize the number, or even if you think you might, let your answering machine pick it up, let your voicemail pick it up. And you know, if you happen to pick up and you get that empty air or that bloop sound, you know that that's a robodialer, just hang up right away. What happens is these guys are calling the next number in the list. So they're just adding one to the number and calling the next one. They have no idea if these numbers are attached to real people, if they're assigned, if they're unassigned, if it's a fax machine. They have no idea. They're just running these numbers through their system, and they're just trying to see if they can find a connected phone number where someone will pick up the phone and engage. So if you don't pick up, you don't engage, that number isn't as attractive to the scammers. And during the pandemic, the IT tech support scams, I can't tell you how many people were getting phone calls that there was a virus on their computer out of the blue. But, you know, I think we all know that whenever we do need tech support, we have to fill out a ticket and have them, you know, book an appointment to come and work for us. If you end up talking to someone on the phone, don't close the deal. Hang up. Call back on a number that you have, not a number they give you. Scammers will give you the phone number of the guy in the next cubicle. So you want, if you really think Amazon is calling you, you really think it's your bank calling, hang up and call them back on a phone number that you already had. And just make sure that you really are talking to the person that they claim to be. We also say avoid saying the word yes, which is really difficult. If they call and say, hello, is this Tracy Resvani? Your first instance to say is yes. But there are instances where these companies will take a yes and attach it to all sorts of subscriptions and offers. And they have the recording of your voice saying yes, and that's how they get around it. So you want to make sure that avoid it if you can. It's tough, I know. Next, we want to talk about online safety, cybersecurity. So what is identity theft? That is the opposite of a power of attorney. It's someone who steals your personal information and then uses it without your permission. I think when it comes to identity theft, I think we all know it can disrupt finances and a credit report. I always take a moment to speak really briefly about the impact of medical identity theft, because it is really a sleeper crime. Until the identity thief doesn't pay a medical bill, you won't know that someone is stealing your identity because it won't show up on a credit report. So how do you know if you've been a victim of medical identity theft? You don't get a medication or a drug because the identity thief is allergic to it. You don't get life insurance because the identity thief had some kind of heart attack or something. Maybe you don't get a job because the identity thief has some kind of physical ailment. These are usually red flags when you don't get something that you really should because the medical records are somehow inconsistent with your reality. So it's not something that a credit report or a credit monitoring is going to show up. So it's important to keep that that in mind. Where are you sharing your information? I always say don't overshare. You know, if you're going to the doctor's office, they don't need your social security number. About 30% of my doctors will still have it on their forms. I skip it every time. Your social security number is really for situations where credit is an issue, where banking, finance, your taxes, that's an issue. Doctors don't need it anymore. So what is it that you need to be aware of when you're sharing that information? I always say, like, if you are getting a rewards card at your restaurant, they want to know when your anniversary is. If it's January 1st, say it's January 15th, you'll still get a coupon for the month of January, which is when you want it. Nothing says you have to give real information when all you're looking to do is get coupon sale prices and, you know, reward points. Be very, very careful what you share with who, and really ask them, why do you need it? What is it for? And then feel out whether it matters if it's a lie or not a lie. Briefly, California has this law, the California Consumer Protection Act, where it gives you the right to use a third-party agent to remove information on you that's been collected by data brokers. So the CFPB did a report. There's about 300 consumer reporting agencies. These are businesses whose only job is to collect data on you, package it, and resell it. And so you can, even though we're not in California, can use this law and these third-party agents to try to clean up that record if you want. Excuse me. A bit of nomenclature changes. They all have fancy names for what's happening. Phishing is when you're using, it's phony plus phishing, right? Someone is getting you to give access through your emails, whether it's by clicking on a link, by opening an attachment. They're tricking you into engaging in a way that either gives them money, your personal information, or access. Smishing is the same. It's SMS and phishing. So it's through your text messages, through maybe messenger apps. Again, you are giving access to your data. According to RoboKiller, which is another of the competitors to Truecaller and No More Robo, about 88 billion spam texts for 10 billion in losses were reported in 2021. And so Stir Shaken, which is a federal law that required carriers to verify phone numbers, isn't really working in the text context. So what I mean by verify is that in order to combat a lot of the cloning and the spoofing, you know, Verizon had to make sure, for example, that if a number was calling from a particular Verizon phone number, that that number actually was assigned and it was assigned to the person that was the phone line that was making the call, to try and cut down on the spoofing through international lines. The problem is that while Verizon was able to verify it within, and T-Mobile was able to verify within its own ranks, there was a lot of difficulty in cross verification. So for phone calls, STIR/SHAKEN is still being rolled out, but it doesn't seem to have any real impact on smishing, especially if you're using some kind of a messaging app. Vishing, which is just a fancy way of saying a phone scam, is phishing through the phone. Again, you're giving access. RoboKiller reported 30 billion in losses for $72 billion, 72 billion spam calls. One point, Google voice verification scam. This is where scammers will call and somehow get you to read to them a code that they cause to come through onto your cell phone. And when you give them that code, it's their permission to turn your cell phone number into a connected Google Voice. So now they're using your cell number to make fraud calls, and then all of a sudden you're going to be getting calls back from people angry because they think you've stolen their money. So whenever anyone says, I'm going to send you a PIN or some kind of access code over your phone, please read it back to me. Again, triple check you really are talking to who you think you're talking to, because those codes really do give access to people, and you want to make sure they really should have that access. Hacking is the opposite of all of this. The access is taken without your permission and misused. Other kinds of terminology. So obviously there's lots of different kinds of programs that can get added to your computer, and your computer is not only your desktop, your laptop, your tablet, it's also your cell phone. So depending on what you link, you may be downloading something that launches other programs. It could be a downright a virus. It could be spyware, so that it's tracking everything you type, including your passwords into your bank accounts. It could take over your system for ransom. It could then recruit your computer to run scams against others. So there's a lot of different things that you could unwittingly be downloading onto your system. Special note about subscription or spam bombs. This is when someone gets a hold of a credit card and wants to hide some fraudulent accounts or transactions. And so what they do is they sign you up for hundreds upon hundreds of subscriptions all over the world. So all of a sudden you'll get like 1,000 emails thanking you for subscribing to whatever this newsletter is. And somewhere in that 1,000 emails is the confirmation of an order for a computer or something. And that's what they're really trying to hide. So if you get a blizzard of emails like that, it's really important to look for the real fraudulent transaction, because you're going to have to unsubscribe for every one of those subscriptions and eventually deal with it. But you really want to find the fraud so you can shut that down. So how can we better protect ourselves and deter from identity theft? Obviously, a shredder is your best friend. If you're getting paper statements, you don't want to carry your social security card. You want your security software updated. So that's on your every kind of device you have. On your smartphone, if it's got some kind of biometrics or PIN or any kind of multi-factor authentication, add it onto any kind of system that you have. You want to also use a passphrase. It could be a series of disconnected words, and then you want to replace some of the letters for numbers and symbols. I use some bizarre, I love kumquat as my sample passphrase, and as you can see in the slide, you can change the O for a 0 and the E for a 3 and the A for an @ sign, etc. So You want to use a different passphrase for every account. And then it's perfectly fine to use a password manager to keep track of it, to just make sure that it's a solid, sourced and vetted and secure password manager, because obviously if they are not secure, then they get hacked. Then the hackers have every password you ever had. Don't put checks in the mail. Don't put gift cards in the mail, especially if by mail, I mean your mailbox and then you lift that little red flap. There's been a rash of thefts from mailboxes, and I'm actually hearing that some of the blue mailboxes are now getting hit in the area because somehow they've gotten a hold of a skeleton key that opens up all of the mailboxes. So it's ideally you would take it to the post office and drop it off at the mail in the building itself. Maybe the blue boxes right outside the post offices are safe because there's cameras on them. But they seal the checks, they wash the checks, they rewrite them. So it's basically a counterfeit scheme. So you want to avoid putting anything like that has any value in your mailbox. On your Wi-Fi routers, you want to make sure that you've got really strong passwords and you're using at least WPA2 encryption. If you ever use public Wi-Fi, like at the mall or at Starbucks or something, make sure you enable VPN. You can add VPN to your virus software. You can probably get a VPN app for your phone that's free or pretty inexpensive. So you want to make sure you're protecting your devices. And if you do get some kind of smishing text, forward them to the FCC at 7726. They like to get a hold of them all so they get a sense of what exactly is happening out there. A quick conversation about QR codes. The pandemic made them relevant again. They were actually just becoming almost obsolete, and then it just became huge during the pandemic, especially because restaurants turned to them. You want to make sure that if you're being offered a QR code that it's not a sticker, because sometimes the space for the QR code can get hijacked, and so someone can put their own sticker on there and then take your phone to an alternative spoof website where they can download some kind of malware on it. So you want to always sort of make sure that you're actually interacting with the correct QR code if you are there. Sometimes you might see QR codes on billboards, at the bus stop, that kind of place. Just make sure that there's been no tampering. Shopping online, you've got a lot of options. I always say credit cards are the safest to shop online. They're not linked to a bank account. They build you your credit. You've got protections under the Fair Credit Billing Act. Now you've got the chip, and if the chip is really important, because if you go to a terminal and you have to swipe it, that means that it's not an encrypted transaction. And if that transaction is somehow hacked, that store is now on the hook for trouble penalties. So it's safest to use the chip rather than swiping it. Notice that I said credit cards are not linked to your bank accounts. So if you have what I call the hybrid cards, those are the old ATM cards that has your Visa, MasterCard logo on them. Those are not true credit cards. Those are not exactly debit cards either. They're kind of a hybrid card. They are linked to your bank account. So that means there's no protections under the Fair Credit Billing Act. And there's have some protections under the Electronic Funds Transfer Act. So what does that mean? FCBA is the one that says I can dispute the charge and I'm only on the hook for at most $50. EFTA says if you report the scam before it happens, the fraud before it happens, you're not on the hook for anything. If you report the fraud within a certain number of days, $50. Within a certain number of additional days, maybe $250. And after a certain amount of time, you could be entirely on the hook. So those hybrid cards don't have the same protections, but they also run the risk of, if someone gets a hold of it, they can wipe out your entire bank account. And so while you're fighting with your bank to possibly get the money back, you don't have money to pay your bills, etc. You don't want to wire money to anyone you're dealing with online. There's real estate. Obviously, we're in the height of the real estate market right now. There's a lot of escrow theft that happens. Somehow these guys figure out who's ready to go to closing, and they send an email from a very similar sounding email address to what the homeowner, the prospective homeowner, is expecting, and they basically hijack the escrow, the earnest money deposit. So whenever you're dealing with any online transaction and they want wire, you have to be very, very careful. I've got, we have a program on our YouTube page about safely using payment apps. So I definitely send folks to YouTube at HOCO Community, to our consumer protection playlist, to have a more robust conversation about this. But there I advocate that you do not use payment apps to shop online. They have even less protections than the debit cards. The sheer number of criminals that have bailed out of using gift cards for scams and are now using payment apps is staggering. In some instances, they're treated like cash. There's almost no statutory protections, and there's some serious privacy and security concerns with using payment apps online. And then real quickly, with these buy now, pay later, neither of the two federal statutes I'd mentioned clearly apply, because these are sort of a cross between layaway and credit. So if you're shopping online and you go and you use Klarna or Affirm, you may not have the same protection. So online safety when you're shopping, credit card is king. I'll talk really quickly about payment apps. They're designed for peer-to-peer as a way to give money to people you know. You're still sharing information with a non-bank entity, unless, of course, you're dealing with Zelle, which is your bank. And there's just the sheer amount of scams out there is staggering that uses payment apps. But if you do use them, double and triple check that the person that you're sending to that address is correct. It's almost impossible to claw back a payment app transaction that goes awry. And if you use it, set up a PIN, set up multi-factor authentication. You don't want someone who gets a hold of your phone to be able to have direct access to your money through one of these apps. Remember at the top of the hour, I mentioned about 25% of all scams in 2021 started on social media. This is why during the pandemic, things that you couldn't find were all of a sudden getting advertised on Facebook and Instagram. These were fake websites selling fake products that didn't exist, or if they did, they were completely counterfeit. It was also a way of scammers trying to steal money or personal information by setting up perhaps romance scams. We'll talk about that in a little bit as well. And what I read just earlier today is that there are websites that create images for profiles. So artificial intelligence can create human lifelike pictures for profiles. And so LinkedIn apparently has a lot of that on there, as do some other social media presences. So it's very, very difficult to know if the picture is even a real human anywhere in the world, let alone the human that claims to be the one you're talking to. So the first line is to obviously take the picture and do a Google image search. However, there's also a new Chrome extension app that allows you to determine if this is an AI generated photo. You can look at the social media account. What are the follower to engagement ratios? How long has this company that's advertising on Instagram been in business? Remember, Scam Advisor is your friend there. do the product reviews match? There's sometimes I've gone on Amazon and I'm looking at a pair of shoes and the reviews are talking about how great the hair care product is. I mean, it's just clearly that they have hijacked a different product and just changed the photograph and the name, and yet all the consumer reviews for the hair care product are still there. So you want to do a little bit of digging and make sure that the account information and the reviews that you might be seeing on the social media sites is actually makes sense when you think about it. So romance scams are not about romance. It leads to a broken heart for sure, but it is essentially a con game. It's called catfishing. Sometimes it's called love bombing. And these folks could be anywhere in the world. And it's apparently Ghana and Nigeria are big in creating a whole set of technology-based approaches to it. If you have Netflix, watch Tinder Swindler. If you go to YouTube, look up Trafficked in America. They did a whole program on romance scams, and the technology and the teamwork that goes into a romance scam criminal enterprise is staggering. But they find their victims through dating websites, social media, gaming apps, and then they create a persona that they think matches with what public information you're putting out there. So that's how they hook. That's how they find that hook to reel you in. Whether it's your interest, your faith, your hobbies, they find a way. And their ultimate goal is money. They'll start small and be like, oh, I wish I could come to you, but I'm short on money. Hey, could you loan me the $500 to fly? And of course, they never fly to come see you. Before the pandemic, the story always was, I'm at Doctors Without Borders. I'm on an offshore oil rig. I'm stationed abroad. Internet access is really bad. And so they couldn't ever really do video. And now with AI faces and things like that, video is an option. But with the pandemic, not being able to be there in person, it became not unusual. And so during the pandemic, the catfishing, the con games exploded. And so there's this new species of romance scam called the crypto rom, where they're essentially developing a relationship with you and then slowly talking about this cryptocurrency investment that they are getting into. And hey, they can tip you off and they'll help you invest. And at first you'll get some money back. And so you think, oh, this is working. And so you invest more and then the money is gone. So they'll give you fake statements. They'll show you fake returns. Your money is just gone. And sometimes we've seen instances where they, hey, I've got this inheritance, but due to some convoluted reason, they can't put it into a bank account. And so they want to know if they can give it to you, and then can you then wire it to some other bank account? Well, guess what? You've now become a money mule in a money laundering scheme. So these catfishers use many different aspects of the romance scams to get you your money and your time invested in their schemes. Door-to-door scams. It's now spring season, and the scammers will be coming to knock. So how do you determine what's a legitimate versus a non-legitimate? You're going to get a lot of folks coming door to door to sell you siding, a new roof, solar panels, windows, doors. Those are normal. They're coming. However, you may get folks coming to your door and they'll say, oh, I was just doing work on your neighbor 2 streets down and I have extra stuff and extra materials, and they recommended that I contact you. But you know what? In this day and age, if a contractor can't know how much to buy, then you don't want them for a contractor anyway. So that's a scam. So that's how you tell them apart. If they're just there to sell you a contract and they've got all their briefcase with all the different finishes and things like that, they should have our license. Remember, we issue the peddler and solicitor license. ask to see it. If they say it's back at the office, my company has it, we don't each have it, they each need to have it. So that's how you can tell a home improvement scammer from someone who's legitimately selling a home improvement project. Obviously, political and census takers, religious callers will come to the door. Those don't need our license because they're not peddling, they're not selling you something. What other kinds of scams might come to your door? You know, every now and again, you'll see kids that get dropped off in neighborhoods to sell magazines or candy. There's a concern that this is either unpaid or underpaid child labor. They may never get the promised camp. You may never get the magazine. The candy might be really old. There's also the bigger risk. These kids are dropped off in neighborhoods without any adult supervision, and they're at risk themselves. So that's an issue. You may get folks coming to your door saying, I'm from Pepco, I'm from BG&E, I'm from Washington Gas, and I think you're paying us too much, said no company ever. And so they will not leave until you show them your bill. Don't show them your bill. They want your account number so they can switch you. Maryland's a deregulated energy market, which means that whoever supplies your energy doesn't have to be the same as the company that provides you the bill. So if your energy supplier is changed and you're used to getting a bill from Pepco, guess what? You will still get your bill from Pepco. It's kind of like a loan. Your lender might be different than your servicer. So you want to make sure that you never allow them to see your bill. And again, they need to have that peddler's and solicitor's license as well. Parking lot pirates is an interesting species. Usually these guys approach you in a parking lot, offer you car repair, you know, whether it's to fix your car or fix, you know, mechanical, or whether it's an auto body. They're usually dent fixers. But what they do is they drill a couple holes in your car, they pull the dent out, they smear the stuff on it, and they say wait 2 days and then wipe it off. And then, you know, after 2 days, when you wipe it off, you see that what you really have is a car with 2 holes. It's a form of vandalism and it's theft. It's a fraud. And the reason I mention this in the context of door to door is that we've seen some instances of these drive-bys through neighborhoods looking for victims when parking lots perhaps are not providing them with a sustainable source of income. So be very careful. At the beginning, I mentioned woodchucks, and I said there was a special species of home improvement scam. So the guys that come to your door and say, I've got extra roofing material or extra material for your driveway, they should definitely be licensed by the Maryland Home Improvement Commission. So not only do you want to see the peddler's license, you want to see their home improvement license. But what happens is the woodchucks are a little different. These are primarily landscapers, primarily storm chasers, and for some reason, most of them come from Culpeper County, Virginia. And they are cleaning up your yard, trimming your branches, whatever it is. And while they're up in your tree, which is why they're called woodchucks, while they're in your tree, they notice, oh, your roof needs help, or your siding is bad, or your gutters, or whatever. So they try to come up with some kind of home improvement work. And they'll give you some invoice with a fake company name and a fake phone number. And they'll ask for a deposit, which will pay because the price will be amazing, and then you'll never see them again. So woodchucks are essentially deposit thieves. If they do return, it's always going to be unpermitted, uninspected, and substandard. They may even take the insurance money and never return. So it's really important to do your due diligence as we go into the home improvement season. And on the 19th, Money Matters is doing a whole program on how to use the financial literacy skills to plan and execute on a home improvement project. So definitely join us in for that on the 19th. The last chapter we'll talk about is mail scams. It's not just junk mail anymore. It used to be that we would get everything in the mail, and an email was a free way to send junk mail as well as scams. And then the filters came in and they work so well that guess what? They're coming back to the mailbox. So mail marauders, we talked about them. They're the ones who steal your mail looking for checks or gift cards or maybe tax documents. We are coming on IRS tax season. Porch pirates are those that steal your shipments at the door. It's basically a new age form of shoplifting, and it's a lot safer than shoplifting from actual stores anymore. Scammers can divert your mail by going into the post office and diverting your mail as well. So you want to make sure you're reporting all of this to the U.S. Postal Inspection Service. Be aware that lottery sweepstakes winnings will show up in the mail along with a check to pay for taxes. You have to deposit the check, but guess what? That's a counterfeit check. Your bank will give you basically like a micro advance on those. So whenever the check becomes available, it's not really cleared. Your bank is fronting you the money. It could take up to 2 weeks to clear. And so you think the money is available. So you're paying good money for a sweepstake that you won. And then the original check will bounce. So be very aware that scams are coming to your mailbox as well. So I want to be cognizant that we had a 1-hour program, but this is how you can find us at howardcountymd.gov/consumer. You can email us questions as well. But if folks have any questions, I'm happy to answer them now, or you can get in touch with us later.
Well, great, Tracy. We'll give it a couple minutes for the folks that are joining us online to ask any questions. You can feel free to go ahead and put your question into the chat box. I believe we might also have the ability to unmute you, but you would still have to let us know that you have a question. I will go ahead and pose a question just while we're waiting. So, Tracy, I know you have mentioned the importance of reporting scams to your office. Are there any other offices that folks that feel that they have been the victim of a scam should report to? I know you had some stats from the FTC, the FBI, or is that all handled if they report it through consumer protection?
So there's a lot of different places that you could very well be directed to, and figuring out where to go at a particular given time is difficult. So we always say come to us, and then we can help you figure out where to report. And at the same time, we can put out an alert if we see that there's an increase or an uptick in a particular kind of scam. But if you've lost money, the FBI, the IC3.gov, which is the Internet Crime Center, IC3.gov, you want to report the money losses to the FBI. The Federal Trade Commission and the Federal Communication Commission, they will take your reports for statistical purposes. They don't deal with individual instances of fraud. And then there's other agencies depending on particularities. So if it's a postal scam, it would be the U.S. Postal Inspection Service. But we absolutely have no problem if folks want to just call us, and we're happy to direct.
Great. So we do have some time if anyone has any questions. I'll go ahead and ask another question that was sent to us. Earlier, you had talked about different types of scams that are offered. And one thing that they had seen was the voice cloning scams. So is that something you can talk about? Is that something we're really seeing here on the East Coast, or is that more of a southern region, kind of Texas scam?
Well, nothing stays in one area, so it is interesting. I did read something about it earlier. I'd like to do a little bit more on that, because that is a bit scary, because obviously a lot of us are on TikTok, and we're doing, video marketing on Instagram. We're doing a webinar here today. So it's very important to be aware of all the ways that things are happening. These criminals are so incredibly bright, and they know how to get around things. But I think the original voice scam, I think I mentioned, is the yes scam, where they record your voice saying yes so they can then subscribe you to all kinds of monthly services. So no, I think that we will be seeing a lot more of the voice cloning. I don't think it's going to be limited to Texas or the southern region.
Okay. Thanks, Tracy. We did get a message in the chat box asking if the presentation that you presented tonight can be made available to the public. Is that something we can post on the Money Matters website and Consumer Protection?
Right. So once we have the videos recorded, which they are being recorded, they'll be on the Money Matters website. I can definitely provide the PowerPoint slides so that they'll be available as well. So folks can rewatch the program, send it to friends. We obviously can't talk to everyone in Howard County, so it's really important for people to pass the word and help get the message out.
Great. So we do have a couple more minutes, but certainly this is not the end of the conversation. As Tracy mentioned earlier, there is another Money Matters workshop that's later this month that focuses on stretching your home improvement dollars. We also, throughout the month of April, is Money Matters month in Howard County, and that highlights the importance of financial literacy. So generally about 3 times a week we'll be hosting sessions, and then you would register the same way that you registered for this session. And we do hope that you'll tune in to join us. And so with that, I don't see any other questions in the chat box, but certainly on the slide that you see is the email for our Office of Consumer Protection as well as their website. And do not hesitate to call, email if you have any questions. Any final comments, Tracy?
No, and if you want, I can definitely put the flyer for the full program on if folks would like to see it. I can definitely switch what I'm sharing so that folks can see what other programs they can log into. So we had the first program, and going forward, there's some great programs on credit and credit reporting by CCSMD, and a program on making your money behave this week by Making Change, and a lot of great programs coming in next week, as folks can see, and into the rest of the month. I think the last program we have is the one on cryptocurrency and digital assets, which is, I'm personally looking forward to. But folks should definitely sign up for all of these because they're going to be great programs.
Absolutely. So before we conclude things, I did see that one of the individuals had sent a question through the chat. I'm not sure if anyone can see that. I don't see it personally. Ken, I don't know if you have the ability. Can you unmute James?
Oh, I see the question. Is Apple Pay not a good choice? And it says, would you explain what you mean by layered sticker? Oh, okay. All right. So if you are, say, at a restaurant or at a, say the bus stop, right? And there's a QR code. If you look at it, it should be a smooth service. There shouldn't be a sticker on top of that QR code. That's usually your first clue that the QR code has been altered in some way. So you want to make sure that the QR code is a smooth surface, not another sticker. If you see a sticker, you want to definitely question that. Apple Pay is interesting, and if you go to the whole program that I mentioned on HOCO Community's YouTube page on payment apps, Apple Pay, Consumer Reports deemed it to be the safest because it had the least amount of information on you. Not that it's not a good choice, it's that it was safest from data security. The problem with payment apps is that if something goes wrong and you're in a situation where the transaction was fraudulent, you don't have a lot of legal protections to help you get that money back. So from that perspective, Apple, Venmo, PayPal, Cash App, they're all on fairly equal footing. But from a data security perspective, Apple is the most secure because it has the least amount of information to lose. I hope that makes sense. If not, let me know.
All right, James, if you have any other questions on that, you can feel free to contact Consumer Protection offline, as well as if anyone that's joining us has any additional questions, the phone number is 410-313-6420, or you can email consumer@howardcountymd.gov. And with that, that concludes our presentation tonight. On behalf of County Executive Calvin Ball and our entire Money Matters planning team, we thank you for tuning in.
Good night.
Good night.